Tonight, we explore 3 of the strangest UFO encounters ever reported. From mysterious airships appearing decades before modern aviation, to terrifying blob-like entities emerging from the fog in Sweden, to a mass sighting in Papua New Guinea where witnesses claim figures aboard a glowing craft waved back at them. Welcome to Strange Encounters. In November of 1896, something appeared in the skies over California that should not have existed. Not according to history, not according to aviation, and certainly not according to the people who stood in the streets staring upward in disbelief. Years before the Wright brothers achieved powered flight at Kitty Hawk, before airplanes became part of ordinary life, newspapers across the United States began reporting sightings of mysterious aerial craft moving silently through the night sky. At first, people assumed they were seeing some kind of experimental invention, but as the sightings spread, the reports became stranger. Witnesses described gigantic cigar-shaped machines illuminated by brilliant electric lights. Some claimed the craft hovered motionless against the wind. Others reported hearing voices, singing, or mechanical noises drifting down from above. And in a handful of cases, people claimed the machines landed. The wave would eventually spread across the country, generating more than 1,000 newspaper articles in hundreds of papers across the United States and Canada. Today, most people know the phenomenon as the mystery airship wave of 1896 and 1897. But to understand what people actually experienced, it helps to go back to the beginning. Not to modern retellings, to the newspapers themselves. The first widely publicized sighting took place on the evening of November 17, 1896, in Sacramento, California. The weather was poor, clouds hung low over the city, and rain had fallen earlier in the evening. Around 6 o'clock, residents noticed a bright light moving slowly through the sky. The object appeared low enough that witnesses believed they could make out a dark structure behind the light itself. One of the most important details, and one often omitted in modern summaries, is that the earliest witnesses were not immediately describing a futuristic flying machine. Many were simply trying to explain an impossible light. Electric lighting was still relatively new in many places, and the newspapers repeatedly compared the object's brightness to arc lamps or locomotive headlights because those were among the brightest artificial lights people commonly knew at the time. That comparison mattered. To a witness in 1896, saying a light resembled an arc lamp was not a casual description. It implied something extraordinarily brilliant and technologically advanced. According to reports printed the following day in the Sacramento Bee and the San Francisco Call, the object moved slowly across the city while witnesses gathered in the streets to watch it. A state official named George Scott climbed to the observation platform above the California State Capitol with several companions. From that elevated position, they believed they could see not one light, but several. Above the lights was what they described as a dark, oblong form. The newspapers quickly became fascinated by one witness in particular, a Sacramento carpenter named R.L. Lowry. Lowry claimed that as the object passed overhead, he heard voices coming from above. According to his account, someone aboard the craft shouted instructions about increasing altitude to avoid striking a church steeple. Modern readers sometimes misunderstand this passage because the tone of 19th century newspapers could be unusually playful or sarcastic. Lowry himself reportedly joked that there were no nearby church steeples in that area of Sacramento, and suggested the voice may actually have been referring to the tower of a brewery instead. That detail is important because it shows the witnesses were not necessarily presenting the event with solemn certainty. Some were excited, some were skeptical, some were clearly enjoying the absurdity of the moment. That mix of fascination and humor runs through many of the original newspaper accounts and is often lost in modern paranormal retellings. But Lowry's description became even stranger. He claimed the craft appeared to be powered by two men pedaling furiously beneath the structure, almost like operators on an enormous airborne bicycle. Above them sat what appeared to be a passenger compartment. Other witnesses claimed they could hear singing drifting down from the craft as it moved overhead. To modern audiences, the description sounds bizarre, but in the 1890s, it actually reflected contemporary ideas about futuristic engineering. Bicycles were one of the most advanced and popular technologies of the era. The bicycle craze of the 1890s had transformed transportation, manufacturing, and even social culture across America. So when witnesses imagined the mechanics of a flying machine, bicycle pedals and gears seemed entirely reasonable. This is one of the most fascinating aspects of the airship way. The objects consistently resembled what people of the late Victorian era imagined advanced aircraft should look like. Not metallic saucers, not triangular military craft, but dirigibles, propellers, wings, rudders, electrical lamps, and mechanical engines. It was as though the mystery adapted itself to the technological imagination of the time. Within days, the sightings spread beyond Sacramento. Reports emerged from Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, Stockton, Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and dozens of smaller communities throughout California. The scale of the sightings is another detail often understated today. Thousands of people claimed to witness the objects. Police officers, conductors, streetcar workers, public officials, attorneys, ministers, and business owners all appeared in newspaper interviews. One especially strange report came from San Francisco near the Cliff House and Seal Rocks. According to local papers, a brightly illuminated object passed over the shoreline late at night, frightening large groups of sleeping seals, which reportedly plunged into the ocean in panic. That story sounds theatrical today, but the newspapers presented it as supporting evidence that something physical had truly passed overhead. Another frequently overlooked detail is how quickly the newspapers began treating the airship as real technology rather than fantasy. Many articles did not ask whether the craft existed, they debated who had invented it. Some speculated it was the work of a secretive California genius preparing to unveil the world's first practical aircraft. Others believed it might be tied to military experiments, and some suspected elaborate hoaxes designed to manipulate stock prices or attract investment. One San Francisco attorney named George D. Collins became deeply connected to the story after telling reporters he had been approached by a mysterious inventor seeking legal assistance for a revolutionary airship project. Collins claimed the inventor operated from a hidden location near Oroville, California. For a time, newspapers treated the story seriously, but the attention soon became overwhelming. Reporters mocked Collins relentlessly, nicknaming him Airship Collins. Crowds hounded him for information, and eventually he recanted portions of his story before disappearing from public view. That reaction reveals something important about the period. Even while many people believed the sightings were genuine, the public was also deeply suspicious of newspaper sensationalism. The late 19th century was the golden age of what critics call yellow journalism, highly dramatic reporting designed to boost circulation. Editors competed fiercely for readers, and impossible stories sold newspapers. In fact, one of the strongest skeptics of the airship wave was newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst himself. In December of 1896, the San Francisco Examiner published an editorial condemning what Hearst called fake journalism, accusing rival papers of inventing the airship stories entirely. But even that criticism failed to stop the sightings. Instead, the mystery expanded eastward. By early 1897, reports began appearing across Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, Texas, and beyond. As the wave spread, the stories became increasingly strange. Witnesses no longer described distant lights alone. Some now claimed direct encounters with the occupants. One detail modern audiences may not realize is that 19th century newspapers often blended humor, fiction, rumor, eyewitness testimony, and outright hoaxes together without clearly separating them. That makes historical interpretation difficult. For example, one famous 1896 report from Stockton described a man named Colonel H.G. Shaw encountering tall, thin beings beside a landed craft. The entities supposedly made strange musical noises before boarding the object and departing into the sky. Modern UFO books sometimes present the story as a straightforward alien encounter, but reading the original context reveals the article carried a semi-humorous tone common to newspapers of the era. Editors often expected readers to recognize exaggeration or satire without explicit labels. That does not necessarily mean every report was fake, but it does mean modern retellings sometimes remove the ambiguity that originally surrounded these accounts. And yet, not all the witnesses were anonymous cranks or comic storytellers. Some reports came from law officers, judges, ministers, and groups of independent witnesses describing the same objects from different locations. That is part of what keeps the mystery alive. The wave culminated in one of the most famous stories in early UFO history, Aurora, Texas. On April 19, 1897, the Dallas Morning News published a remarkable article claiming an airship had crashed into a windmill on the property of Judge J.S. Proctor. According to the report, debris scattered across the area, and the pilot was discovered dead inside the wreckage. The article described the being as not an inhabitant of this world. Locals allegedly buried the body in the town cemetery. Modern researchers have spent decades investigating the Aurora story. Some believe it was a complete fabrication created to attract attention to a struggling town. Others suspect the article exaggerated a real accident involving experimental machinery. No conclusive evidence has ever resolved the case, but regardless of whether the crash truly happened, the article itself is historically important because by 1897, Americans were already telling stories that sound astonishingly similar to modern UFO lore. Mysterious craft, strange occupants, crash retrievals, and speculation about beings from another world. Long before Roswell, long before flying saucers. And then, almost as suddenly as it began, the airship wave faded away. By the summer of 1897, the sightings had largely stopped. No inventor publicly demonstrated a matching aircraft. No confirmed machine was ever recovered. No definitive explanation emerged. What remains today is a strange historical snapshot of America standing at the edge of the modern age. A world of gaslights, horse-drawn wagons, telegraph wires, and Victorian industry, suddenly confronted by impossible machines drifting silently through the night sky. Were the sightings simply a product of mass suggestion, amplified by sensational newspapers? A series of elaborate hoaxes, misidentified astronomical phenomena, secret experimental aircraft decades ahead of their time, or something even stranger. Whatever the explanation may be, the people of 1896 believed they were witnessing the future descending from the sky, and for a few extraordinary months, the future looked impossible. On the night of December 20th, 1958, two young men were driving along a lonely coastal road in southern Sweden when they claimed they encountered something so bizarre that even decades later, UFO researchers still struggle to classify it. Not because the object in the sky was unusual, but because of what came out of it. The encounter became known as the Domsten case, or more famously, the Domsten Blobs. And depending on which version of the story you believe, the two witnesses either survived a terrifying close encounter with strange entities in the fog, or narrowly escaped an attempted abduction. The village of Domsten sits along Sweden's southwestern coast, north of Helsingborg, overlooking the waters of the Öresund Strait. In winter, the coastline can become isolated and eerie, especially late at night when fog rolls in from the sea. That was the setting in the early morning hours of December 20th, 1958. The two witnesses were Hans Gustafsson and Stig Rydberg, co-workers from Helsingborg. According to the earliest Swedish accounts, the men had spent the evening driving around nearby towns with two young women before eventually heading home sometime after midnight. They were traveling in a small DKW station wagon along the coastal road near Domsten at roughly 3 in the morning. Visibility was poor. Fog drifted across the roadway, and the landscape around them was almost completely dark. Then they noticed a strange glow coming from beside the road. At first, they thought it might be another car, but as they approached, they realized the light was stationary. The men stopped the vehicle and stepped out into the cold fog to investigate. What happened next became one of the strangest UFO encounters ever reported in Scandinavia. According to the witnesses, they saw a large disc-shaped object resting on 3 angled landing legs near the roadside. The craft emitted a pale glow through the mist, and moving around it were several bizarre creatures unlike anything either men had ever seen before. The earliest Swedish descriptions are surprisingly vague. The entities were described simply as strange beings, low to the ground, gray in color, and moving in an unnatural manner. But as the story spread internationally in UFO books and magazines during the 1960s, the creatures became far more vivid in description. They were now portrayed as shapeless blobs, gelatinous, semi-liquid, like living masses of gray jelly sliding through the fog. Some accounts compared them to giant amoebas or protozoan creatures. Others described them as wobbling stacks of flesh that seemed barely solid at all. One detail remained consistent across nearly every version of the story: the smell. The witnesses allegedly described an overpowering odor surrounding both the craft and the entities. Different retellings compared it to either chemicals, rotting organic matter, or burnt sausage. Whatever it was, the men reportedly found it nauseating. At some point during the encounter, the beings approached them. And this is where the story begins to split into multiple versions. In the earliest surviving Swedish summaries, the men were attacked or physically overwhelmed by the entities near the craft. One witness later claimed he struck one of the creatures with his fist and that his arm seemed to sink into it almost up to the elbow, as if the thing had no solid internal structure. That detail appears in several later paranormal compilations, though it is difficult to trace precisely when it first entered the story. But the most dramatic version of events came later, particularly in English-language UFO books. According to those accounts, one of the men was seized by an invisible pulling force that attempted to drag him toward the object. Realizing what was happening, he desperately grabbed hold of a roadside signpost to keep from being pulled away. The entities reportedly struggled to dislodge him. For several terrifying moments, the witness hung onto the sign while the creatures continued trying to force him toward the craft. Some retellings claim the entire struggle lasted around 7 minutes. Then suddenly, the attempt stopped. The beings retreated, and the object departed. That version of the story became especially famous after paranormal writer Frank Edwards included the case in his book, Strange World. But there's an important distinction to make here. The roadside signpost and attempted abduction details are far more prominent in later UFO literature than in the earliest Swedish reports available today. It doesn't necessarily mean the details were invented. It's possible they originated in newspaper interviews, oral testimony, or UFO newsletters that are now difficult to access. But modern researchers have noted that the story appears to grow more dramatic as it moved through international UFO culture during the 1960s. And that's where the Domsten case becomes particularly interesting, not just because of what the witness claimed to see, but because of how the story evolved over time. Even in its earliest form, however, the encounter caused serious attention in Sweden. Police interviewed the witnesses, military authorities reportedly took interest, and both men underwent questioning and examinations afterward. The case quickly became national news. At the height of the flying saucer era, Sweden was already experiencing waves of UFO reports, but the Domsten encounter stood apart because the entities were so bizarre. Most close encounter stories of the 1950s involved glowing discs, small humanoids, or silent observers standing near landed craft. The Domsten entities were different. They weren't described as intelligent-looking visitors from another planet. They sounded biological, unstable, almost unfinished, like something crawling out of a nightmare rather than descending from the stars. Over the years, Swedish UFO investigators revisited the case many times. Some researchers eventually became skeptical. Questions emerged about inconsistencies in the witnesses' accounts. Others suggested the story may have been exaggerated through repeated retellings. But even skeptical investigators admitted the case had unusual features that made it difficult to dismiss completely. The witnesses maintained their story for years, and regardless of whether the encounter was real, imagined, misunderstood, or embellished later by writers and publishers, the core incident left a permanent mark on Scandinavian UFO history, because there is something uniquely unsettling about the imagery attached to the Domsten case. A fog-covered coastal road before dawn, a glowing object standing silently in the mist, and strange gray creatures moving through the darkness toward two terrified men. Nearly 70 years later, the Domsten Blobs remain one of the strangest and most controversial close encounter reports ever to emerge from Sweden, not because it provides clear answers, but because it refuses to fit comfortably into any category. Alien encounter, hoax, mass panic, folklore, or something else entirely. And somewhere in the middle of all those conflicting versions, two men stepped out into the fog in December of 1958 and claimed they saw something impossible waiting beside the road. In the late 1950s, deep along the remote northeastern coast of Papua New Guinea, a series of sightings unfolded that would become one of the most compelling UFO encounters ever documented. Unlike many famous UFO stories, this case didn't revolve around radar tracks, anonymous military leaks, or a lone frightened witness. Instead, it involved dozens of people: missionaries, teachers, villagers, medical assistants. And at the center of it all was a man named Father William Booth Gill. What makes the Boianai encounter so remarkable isn't just the description of a strange craft in the sky. It's the claim that witnesses saw human-like figures standing on top of the object, and that those figures appeared to wave back. Even today, investigators still debate exactly what happened over Boianai in June of 1959. But very few dismiss the case entirely, because unlike many UFO stories that survive only through rumor and retelling, Father Gill documented the events immediately, carefully, and in writing, and the details have remained consistent for more than 60 years. The village of Boianai sat near the coast beneath the mountains of Papua New Guinea, then administered by Australia. It was isolated. At night, the region was almost completely dark except for lanterns and scattered mission lights. The skies overhead were extraordinarily clear. Father Gill was an Anglican missionary stationed at the Boianai mission. By most accounts, he was not a sensationalist. In fact, before the major sightings began, he had reportedly dismissed earlier reports from local villagers who claimed strange lights were appearing over the area. He initially assumed they were stars, planets, or ordinary aircraft. But that skepticism would begin to change in June of 1959. For weeks, strange aerial lights had reportedly been observed around nearby villages. Some accounts describe glowing discs. Others describe silent lights hovering over the mountains. Then, on the evening of June 26th, everything escalated. At approximately 6:45 p.m., Father Gill noticed a bright light approaching from the northwest. At first glance, he believed it might be a star, but it moved. As others gathered outside the mission, the object appeared to descend and hover at relatively low altitude near the mission station. The witnesses described it as a large circular object with a broad lower section and a smaller upper structure. Some compared it to a platform or disc. Others described it as having a double-deck appearance. Gill estimated the object hovered a few hundred feet above the ground. Witnesses also reported several protrusions or leg-like extensions beneath it. Along the side of the object were glowing sections resembling windows or portholes. At times, a blue light or beam appeared to project upward from the craft into the sky above it. The object remained visible for an astonishing length of time, not seconds, not minutes, hours. As darkness deepened, more people gathered to watch. And then came the detail that would make the Boianai encounter famous. Figures appeared on top of the object. Father Gill described seeing several human-like forms moving about on the upper portion of the craft. The figures seemed occupied with tasks or observations of their own. Some witnesses later said the beings resembled men standing on a deck. Others described them as silhouettes against the glowing structure beneath them. Importantly, this wasn't just Father Gill making the claim. Multiple witnesses independently reported seeing the figures. One of the strongest aspects of the Boianai case is the sheer number of observers involved. Depending on the source, between 30 and nearly 40 people witnessed portions of the event. At least 25 signed Gill's formal report afterward. These were not anonymous internet claims decades after the fact. These were contemporary witnesses whose names and statements were recorded almost immediately after the incident. The object reportedly vanished into clouds several times before reappearing again. Witnesses continued observing it until late into the night. Then, on the following evening, June 27th, the phenomenon returned. This second night would become the most famous part of the entire encounter. Once again, observers gathered outside the mission station. Once again, the object appeared in the sky. And once again, figures could reportedly be seen standing atop it. Father Gill later wrote that he and another witness decided to wave toward the object. To their surprise, one of the figures appeared to respond. The figure raised an arm and waved back. Gill repeated the gesture several times. According to his report, the figure responded again. Multiple witnesses nearby claimed they saw the same thing. At one point, someone on the ground flashed a torch toward the craft. Witnesses later stated the object appeared to rock or shift position in response. For many investigators, this moment became one of the most extraordinary aspects of the entire case. Because if the witnesses were accurate, this wasn't merely an observation of a distant light in the sky. It suggested interaction, communication, recognition. The sightings reportedly continued intermittently over several nights. Gill carefully documented what had occurred. His notes include timelines, witness names, weather conditions, sketches, and directional observations. And that documentation is one of the main reasons that the Boianai case remains respected today. In UFO history, many famous encounters suffer from serious weaknesses. Sometimes there is only one witness. Sometimes the story changes over time. Sometimes the account wasn't written down until years later. But the Boianai encounter contains several features investigators consider extremely important. First, there were multiple independent witnesses, not just one or two people, but dozens. Second, the observations lasted an unusually long time. Many UFO sightings are fleeting. This event unfolded over hours. Third, the witnesses described structured objects rather than vague lights. And fourth, the reports were documented immediately after the event. Father Gill's written accounts still survive today through archived reproductions and UFO research collections. Even prominent UFO investigator J. Allen Hynek later regarded the case as one of the stronger close encounter reports on record. Of course, skeptics offered explanations. Astronomer Donald Menzel argued the witnesses may have mistaken bright planets or stars for unusual objects. He also suggested atmospheric effects and misperception could explain the reports. But critics of that explanation point to a major problem. Stars do not hover low over villages for hours, while multiple witnesses describe visible humanoid figures moving across their surfaces. Nor do stars appear to respond to hand gestures. Even Hynek concluded that while some smaller lights observed in the region might have had astronomical explanations, the primary object described at Boianai did not fit comfortably into those categories. One detail often overlooked today is that Father Gill did not immediately assume the object was extraterrestrial. He reportedly considered the possibility that it might be some kind of advanced aircraft or experimental technology. That matters because it suggests the witnesses were not automatically framing the event through a science fiction lens. Another reason the case remains so important is the background of the lead witness himself. Father Gill was widely described as calm, educated, and sincere. Researchers who interviewed him later consistently noted that he appeared measured rather than sensational. He did not seem interested in fame. And unlike many UFO stories, there was no obvious financial motive attached to the case. So why is the Boianai encounter relatively unknown today? Part of the answer may simply be geography. The events occurred in a remote part of Papua New Guinea, far from major Western media centers. The case also lacked some of the elements that tend to drive decades of publicity. There was no military crash retrieval, no recovered debris, no dramatic government cover-up, just witnesses standing beneath the night sky describing something they could not explain. And perhaps that simplicity is exactly what makes the story endure. Because stripped of conspiracy theories and sensational claims, the Boianai encounter rests on something far more difficult to dismiss: observation, documentation, consistency. Even after more than 6 decades, the central mystery remains unresolved. What hovered above Boianai in the summer of 1959? What did dozens of people believe they saw moving atop that object? And why did those figures appear to acknowledge the people watching them from below? The answers remain uncertain, but for many researchers, the Boianai Vision stands as one of the strongest and most intriguing mass sighting cases in UFO history, not because of rumors, not because of legends, but because so many details were recorded, witnesses, and preserved at the moment they happened, and because even now, the story refuses to fade away. Whatever the explanation, these stories continue to leave behind questions that still haven't been answered. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment letting me know which case you found the most fascinating. And, as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode of Strange Encounters.